the stress of trying to achieve and then breaking through, and the win that creates and the thrill that it creates can create somewhat of a drug habit, so to speak. So we need to watch that. We need to watch that demand signal. Welcome to the Leveraging Success Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Every time that we're together, I want to help you to work less, make more, and with the margin that you start to store up, you're going to use that to be an incredible spouse, parent, and ultimately live the life mission that God designed you for, the calling that He's got on your life. I'm so excited to have you here today, and this is going to be titled something along the lines of random. We're going to be talking about random things today. Jeff, that's not like you, and it isn't. Let me explain. Today, we've got a set of things that are going to come together in this discussion, and they're going to feel like perhaps disjointed pieces. But some of that's going to be directed, I hope, by the Holy Spirit in a way with which it's going to hit for you. Hey, just remember why we're here, and that's because you're successful. And with that success, you're trying to figure out, how do I leverage it for more? You see, having all of that success, it's led to a place where perhaps you felt this empty feeling of, is this it? Am I just going to be successful? And how come I've got all these other broken pieces in my life? I know that was part of my story, is that back now 15 years ago, being in a place where I was looking up at the ceiling and thinking, okay, how come I'm falling asleep with my laptop and it's become my greatest lover? And my marriage is hanging on. We were certainly in love, or we were committed to each other. And we never, to this day, use the word divorce. That's the D word. We never say that to each other. We don't use that term because it's just not going to lead to anything good. So it's banned. And so we were committed to each other, but it was empty. And then I had these amazing children, 4 amazing children, still do. And with those children, there was something not there in spite of all the vacations, private school, cars, clothes. And at that time, living in Southern California, I mean, it was just all the things that you would think would make things perfect. Plus, we took them to church every week. They were in a youth group. But yet, there were some things that were hollow there that were missing. And so I found myself in a place with all of this stuff that should be going right, not going right. Essentially, I found myself with my ladder leaning up against the wrong wall. And getting to the top of that, it's really discouraging. I go back even further because to get to the top of that ladder, to get to the top of the wall and look around and say, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong place, you'd have to go back to my early 20s. You see, for Heather and I, we got married at 20 years old. We were quite young. Being 20 and getting our life started, it was a lot of things, right? It was getting marriage. By the way, we were pregnant really quickly, so having that happen right away in our marriage, having a need for a career, finishing college, and doing things in our church and raising these kids. So in our 20s, we were doing a lot immediately. The demand on me specifically was incredible. The demand on her was incredible. And we were young. And so a lack of sleep and building something, who cares? I mean, it's just part of the deal. We're going for it. And along the way, I had this lie deposited in me that said that as my kids grow older, they're going to need me less. They're going to become independent. They can dress themselves now. They can feed themselves and go into the refrigerator and take care of things. And so you're set. And if you need anything, just ask your mom. And I'm needed even more now in my job. And so demand from my career was growing. And I was starting to buy this lie of she's got the home front or something like that. And my demand's growing up and the kids need me less. So this is all going to work out. And so there's a pressure that's building up in my late 20s, early 30s. And I don't have a finger on it. We're still under control. We've been able to buy a house, to grow our family, to do fun things. But then the pressure cooker keeps growing, because as my daughters became teenagers, they were still needing me more and more and more. But then I was feeling this demand of crawling up that ladder, and that my career needed me more and more and more. So I said, I got it. Again, I bought another lie, which is that my kids' youth pastor and their teachers at school, those were going to be the additive things that they needed, right? And as long as they were at a good school with good friend group and a youth group and a youth pastor, okay, we've got the spiritual teaching, life things all happening, and mom's still there, so you're good, right? Because I'll see you in the evenings and the weekends, and I'll take you on amazing vacations. You'll never be lacking for anything. Still empty. And so that growing pressure then gets to a place where, as you have success, you start to ask yourself, well, how am I going to be there for my kids? And they need me now. And it's clear. It was clear to me that when my oldest daughter got into high school, her need for me, it wasn't going away, it was going up. And so she was going to chase other boys, and she was going to cry for help in her own way. And while that was growing, I was starting to realize, look, I'm what's missing here. I've become a shadow to my family. I'm leaving them before they're awake. I'm at home after they're asleep. And my thoughts, even when I'm quote unquote present around them, is thinking about work. It was an old joke back in those days for Heather, for my wife, to say, what are you thinking about? No, you don't have to tell me. I know what you're thinking about, Jeff. You're thinking about work. And so it was like this ever-present thought of solving the puzzles at my career. And so it was all-consuming for me. And as I started to realize that I was the missing element, in fact, I was wrecked by it, because I was starting to see my daughter grow up really quickly. And I had this piece of advice given to me right around the time my oldest daughter became 16. It was, Jeff, from the moment she gets her driver's license to the moment that she's walking down the aisle to get married is a snap blink. It's so fast. And so you've got to be there. You've got to be present. I started to implement more of a program, more of an intentional mindset that said, I need to be here. And so what we did is we did Tuesday night ice cream. And I used to tell the girls, ice cream isn't free. And what that meant is, you spend time with me, you eat ice cream, we talk about life, we talk about deeper things. And so what I started to realize about that time is how much more they were needing me, and what I was being coached to think differently about. And that came from my mentor, Bob Schenk. And he said, Jeff, you need to imagine yourself as the chief educational officer of your family, the chief spiritual officer of your family. And so what I realized is that if I don't have an agenda for them, where I'm shaping them and helping them to believe in their dreams, to back their dreams, to be a part of helping them to be encouraged to stay on a path and grow, they'll shrink. They won't be able to imagine something greater than them, because they've never been 30 before. And I started to use the terms with my daughters, hey, listen, I'm fighting for the 35-year-old version of you. And by that, I started to always think, well, what does the 35-year-old version of Megan and Amanda need from me right now? And I'm fighting for the 35-year-old version of all four of my kids now, but I'm always thinking of that, because by the time they get to their mid-30s, if they've been able to not only avoid mistakes, but they've built a strong life foundationally on Christ, and that everything they're doing career-wise, marriage-wise, personally, all based on that foundation, that they're going to be in a good place for the rest of their life, because they'll have created the right habits that they need to have by the time they're 35. So I started to think those thoughts, and by that, it started to change the equation. Now, as I told you, this pressure cooker was happening, right? Is that career continuing to take off, demand on me, at least I imagined the demand on me was high. Which here's a side note to that, right? Is that how high is the demand on you? I think it's a legitimate question, because we start to imagine that everyone needs me. And you know what? By the quantity of email, I can make a case that yes, everyone needs me all the time. But if I treat that demand signal coming from email as the connection to my supply, then I'm being run around on someone else's agenda. And if I were to decide for myself that I'm just not going to allow that to happen, that I'm going to have an agenda, I'm going to have things that I'm going to accomplish, then I'm unhooking from my email as the demand signal on my supply, and I'm now working on my agenda. That's not to say that I don't answer emails or respond to those things, although it's probably the slowest way to get to me. You might get a letter to me before I read an email these days, but I'm simply saying that what is the demand on me, really? Am I really, really needed? Can you experiment with some benign neglect that would allow you to be not there or not responding, and allowing to see if answers happen on their own? Really, I read this today. You don't have a business if you can't not be there. If you have to be there, you're not in business. And so understanding then that, can I disconnect? How much is the real demand to accomplish the real things that I need to accomplish, that it's the right thing for me to accomplish? Then when I've pointed to that, I stop this mindset of I'm needed all the time. Now, this sort of adrenaline junkie part of professionalism that comes along with achieving things can lead us to imagine that my next hit is coming. I feel like a junkie that needs that adrenaline. And so it's like the stress of trying to achieve and then breaking through, and the win that creates and the thrill that it creates can create somewhat of a drug habit, so to speak. So we need to watch that. We need to watch that demand signal. But as I'm coming back to what I was explaining, this pressure cooker of demand, which leaves me in a place where I'm always deciding, who am I disappointing today? And maybe you're it, maybe my kids are it, and I'm now dealing with this concept of how many balls am I juggling, how many of those balls can bounce, and how many of them can break, which I really have come to hate that concept, because it means that I'm going to say to my kids or some things that are important to me, hey, you won't break if I drop you. But this thing at work, I'm going to imagine that it's going to break if I don't keep it in the air. I've completely pulled away from that. And it was largely as a result of great pain. You see, the pressure cooker of the continued demand, it literally had me feeling days with which I would drive to work and my body couldn't move. I was in so much pain. And I would sit in my car in the rain and stare straight forward with just a wave of depression, wave of uncertainty, wave of stress. And success was there. Keep in mind, it wasn't absent, but it was starting to just creep in, because this pressure cooker that I was in was leading me to a place where it felt like something had to change. Now, the good thing about pain is that if used correctly, it can create growth, right? And so the problem of pain is if I try to avoid it. And for me, at least the first 35 years of my life, I spent trying to avoid all pain at all costs, thinking that pain was the enemy. It is not. And so the pain that I was feeling was the signal of, okay, what are you going to change and how are you going to change? And so I knew that my marriage needed improvement, but I didn't know how. Like, shouldn't dates and flowers and affections be enough? Because I can get that all dialed in, but is that enough? Well, I knew that we needed more there. And then my children, how do I have a program with which I'm a part of their education, I'm a part of their wisdom base, and that I'm helping them develop spiritually, I'm helping them to look out into the future and be a part of their success, not just paying for college, but really their developmental success. There was something missing there. And then ultimately inside of me, there was a need to know that my Father in heaven was happy with my work, that what was going to happen on the other side of this eternity was going to be more than being on a cloud somewhere with a harp in a diaper. Is that like the best that I can hope for? And that emptiness, I think, is the common Christian successful leader feeling. You know, there's a parable that Jesus told. I think it's been unfortunately titled the parable of the prodigal son. But really, there's two sons in this equation, right? And the one that we knew very famously is the prodigal, who says, hey, Dad, give me what I deserve. I'm going to take my part. I'm going to head my way. I'm going to do my thing. And then when all the money was gone, and he looked back and thought what his father's servants were eating, he thought, this is better than the slop that I'm sitting in here. I should go home. He goes home, is celebrated. And then there's the second son, the faithful son, who's in the field working. He's the professional, the successful one that's saying, hey, I didn't have sex before marriage. I've never done drugs. Maybe I've never touched alcohol. I've never cheated on my wife. I'm thinking of all the potential rules that could be out there. I didn't. What the heck? Why are you celebrating the guy that took everything and squandered it? You've never thrown a party for me and my friends, but I've been faithful. And I think that there's a lot of that I felt by that time. As I was doing the right thing, working. How come, God, this is not adding up? And really what I discovered is how much that God wants to be with me. Yes, as an overflow of my love of being with him all the time, always present, there'll be a natural service to him, a response to him. But when that response is becoming a professional Christian or a professional do-gooder, that sort of towing the line and expecting that, God, because I've done this for you, I expect the return to me, it just doesn't line up with God's story or what he's hoping for from us. He's aiming for two things. One, to be with me, who loves him and knows him because of Jesus. One, he wants to be with me. And two, he wants to make his home here. And so that being chief, most important, this started to reorient my thinking. So for you who are after it every day, and the promise of this podcast is to say that I want you to be able to work less. Now, all I'm really suggesting to you is that you would find leverage, that you'd be able to get a lot from a little so that you could live a life that would be extraordinary. Look at the business puzzles that we get to work on. They can take 12, 14, 16 unending hours per day, can take up our 100% capacity for sure. And they're fun and they're great. And you get celebrated, rewarded, and that's great. But what if, as you got headroom and freedom, you started to take that professional capability, the one that's got a vision, creates strategy, executes with excellence, builds teams, but does that in the context of your marriage, your family, and in the kingdom space. Now, what you may be feeling, and my initial reflex to saying this to you would be, if I was sitting in your shoes, is, well, Jeff, those three other things, they don't seem to pay as well, or I don't get the same sort of back that I do from my work. Here's what I want you to know. And this, watch this, because this really changed the game for me. It's that the rewards of your career will be amplified in your family, and even more so in eternity. Now, granted, in eternity, the rewards that are going to come to me, this is like a deferred compensation plan, or the ultimate eternal 401k, or my favorite term, an eternal cryptocurrency, right? This is something that's getting stored away that can't be inflated or deflated. It's going to be amazing, the rewards that come in eternity. But I want to set my mind towards that, then to understand that someday being a part of God's plan in eternity will allow for me to experience an even more incredible eternity based on what I do here. So there's something to go after there that's worth it. And then to imagine that as I'm building these children to be incredible, that I want to avoid a life where the only answer for my kids and I to communicate is between a counselor. And how many parents these days have adult children where the only way that they can communicate is through a counselor, right? This approach that I learned is saving me, I don't know, tens of thousands, if not over a lifetime, hundreds of thousands of dollars in counseling, because we don't need it as a result of this approach. So there's something to save, but also to invest and build into. I mean, we want to see these thriving adults who, if we do it right and we continue to grow our wisdom base, I aim for my kids to be tapping on me for wisdom for the rest of my life, and that they'll never outstrip me in wisdom. I won't give up. I'll be continuing to grow, and while I do that, provide for them on many, many fronts. And then what about my marriage? What if instead of just thinking that what we share together, honey, is a bed and a bank account, and that's the most important thing, and we're committed to each other, and we'll try to have, some butterfly feelings for each other from time to time. We'll, have good sex. We'll have a great vacation. We'll, connect. We'll talk about things. We'll be a team. I just think that that's just the basics. What's next level here, if you've got your freedom from your work and you've got leverage, is to say, hey, wait a second, what if our lives we're operating on purpose? What if our marriage was operating on purpose? Meaning, we start to talk about our dreams, my dreams, your dreams, God's dreams, and we intersect those together and say, okay, what if we were to start to execute on those things and make our marriage on purpose? That's what the outflow of so much of Dream Master, the Master's program, has been for me and for others that we get to work with, is the stories of we decided to, as a result of, and we never thought that this was possible, but we started to dream with God, and now all of a sudden we've got plans that we're executing on that's vitalizing our marriage and vitalizing our date nights. Well, all of this is possible, but you have to stay with the promise that I'm after with you, is to work less, make more. And it's, I get it, right? There's some vulnerability that comes with this, like, gosh, Jeff, if I got my freedom, what am I going to do with that freedom? I think what you have to do is to do this methodically over time. Because we've got this mindset, this digital mindset that says that I'll dial up the change and then poof, the change is here. It doesn't work that way. Methodically over time is to say that you install new plays every 90 days so that as you're building this life, you're starting to organize your career to put it in its place. You're building a marriage so that it's strengthening the platform of your life. And you're getting balance as you invest in your children as the chief educational officer, chief spiritual officer. And then as you build that platform of strength that has a lot of focus on my own body, mind, soul, and spirit, I'm working those things into faithfulness and strength, and that strength creates balance for me to do incredible things with. So, but you got to start by getting your freedom. And so getting your freedom is all about starting to rethink your role, rethink what you've assumed is true, and then go back to what's the 20% of me, the genius of me that gets me 80% of my results, and then hone down on those things. Hey, all of this is possible. And my life's a story of that. You've had other people that you've seen on this show, whether you're talking about Rob Dayton, whether you're talking about Luke Womack, you're talking about a Tom Dosh, so many people that have been on this show, Ryan Otteson, incredible people that have found ways to leverage their success. Nino Fincher, who I had on recently, just incredible people. And so what I want for you to be able to do is to start to think for yourself about what's my real demand? What's the real demand on me? And by that, simply getting to what's the essentials that I must accomplish. And then what you're going to be surprised at is that if you get down to the essentials and said, okay, with that, if I were to delegate, eliminate, or automate anything that's not in the essentials, that I will start to have less demand on my time and I can find more freedom. Now, what we do with that freedom is key, right? I can multiply my slavery. I can create the gilded cage of more busyness. And these strategies that we work on to work less, they could just balloon out your opportunities inside of career and never create a platform that's balanced and strong for all of life. But I want you to start to think about the demand. What's the essentials? What could you release? What could you neglect? Start to renegotiate out of your life. And as you do that, you start to rearrange down to the essentials and be committed to the essentials of you. Hey, every time that we're together, we're thinking about these strategies. Today, what I've been doing with you is to help you to see a model in my story and to think of what your story is and how you move in that direction. I really enjoy every time that we get together. So thank you for listening to this podcast. Hey, if you haven't already and you've enjoyed this, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a comment. I would love to respond to your comments. And if you're watching me on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified every time that I release a new video every week. Also, for those of you who would like to know more about how to follow on this journey, want to get more details, you can look at the show notes. I have several links that can link you to free e-courses that are going to help you to speed along and get advanced concepts. But if you've got questions based on what we've talked about today, I would love to get your questions and answer some of those live here on the show. You can email me at jeff@leveragingsuccesspodcast.com. Email me there, and I would love to connect with you. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this time of being strategic to live an extraordinary life, of working less and making more, and living with the margin so that you can be an extraordinary kingdom leader. Until next time, God bless you.